Um, so I tried to make like a title that was as broad as possible and try to come up with a description that would fit anything that I could talk about, last minute. I usually, improvise things, so please bear with me as I go through this. And it is a type of perspective because I think I have not a unique, other people have the same experience, but it's a unique type of perspective from someone that does many different things within the type business. And having the conference having axes as a theme, you're going to see loads of axes here, but they have nothing to do with type design itself, like literally. And this is the first axis that is here because it's the one that I use all the time, even before thinking about axes, all the time that I was giving workshops or teaching anything related to type in schools for many years. I've been drawing this line, which goes from handwriting to type design and then has calligraphy and lettering in between. I'm not going to get into details about this, just saying that I've worked commercially with all of those things and things in between. And also, more things that are falling outside of that line and create a more intricate design space. So with typography, letterpress, planning, organizing, marketing, representing, teaching, speaking, etc., because I just could not remember other stuff. And then thinking about that, there's another project that's been on the back of my mind of creating a database of people in the type design business, and then was thinking about creating the design space of that. Of course, ran out of time, and this is like another project that is in my drawer and is going to stay there for a while until I have time to work on that. So for the sake of this talk, I'm focusing on the design space of my own practice and thinking about our own practices. So who we are, who you are, who I am, what you do, how you do it, why you do it, and who do you do it with? There are also other variables that come into play in this scenario, but not talking about that. And what you do is kind of crossed out because I just briefly talked about that. But then let's start with who you are. There are many tools to kind of get to know yourself. I think that I always say that I think everyone should be in therapy their whole lives. I do it myself. No shame in talking about that, because I think it's a really good thing to understand your triggering mechanisms and then how you act and how you can relate to people. That is a learning curve. Well, let's skip that a bit and then say, for instance, there's this very specific, I don't know how familiar you are with the Myers-Briggs type indicator. It's something that I always saw kind of passing by, and recently I have a client that is a consultant, a coach, and then we are kind of exchanging projects, and then she did this process with me, and her husband applied this test, to find what kind of personality I have and things like that, and kind of puts you in a spectrum, ask you a bunch of questions. This is a test that is developed by two women in the 40s and 50s, was published in the 60s, but it's based on Carl Jung's theory. And it comes up with 16 types of personality. You can find about it online and go about that. But basically, one thing that was very intriguing, and for me it was more of eye-opening, is the first slider that says, because of course it's not about extremes, but everything that you find in between. And with the consultant, it was very challenging to find something, because it was okay, but you're not like this, or you're not like that. It's yeah, how is an introvert person speaking and organizing things and with always people around? It's yeah, but I do hide in the bathroom sometimes, it gets, conferences sometimes gets overwhelming. So if you don't find me around, I'm in hiding mode for a few minutes to recharge and come back. Yeah, end of the day, I do prefer to have, to talk to smaller groups or one-to-one conversations than larger audiences. This is kind of a bit scary sometimes, and I understand that some people can relate to this. But anyway, this is something that, if you understand your mechanisms and how this applies to the things that you do, it gets interesting. Then there are how you do things in your work practice. So what are the parameters that are part of the things that you do? So This is like the ideal situation for a client, right? Like he gets something for free that is done super fast and it's outstanding quality. Those things kind of never happen, right? Like this is the ideal situation for the client. But those lighters can come into play and be something in between. It's up to you to also understand in your practice what are the limits of those axes. And this is the ideal situation for us, right? You get a work that is super exciting, you have great exposure, and you get shit tons of money with it. Of course, that also never happens or rarely happens, and you get things in between. For me, a very tricky axis is the satisfaction one. I've seen students mostly that are super easily satisfied with the things that are created. It's like, oh, I had this idea, and it's awesome, and it's great, and it's like, okay, what else? No, that is it. Like, do you research? No, that is it. It's like, okay, fine. Let's try a bit forward, like a bit more, and see where you can get with that, and other tests around. I'm always on the other end of like, nothing is ever enough. And you go on. So I just don't finish projects. I have deadlines. I need deadlines, right? If it's a personal project, like Vic and Jose talked about projects in their drawers for 2 years, like I find it amazing because my projects are in drawers for like 10, at least. And they just stay there until something happens and they come to surface. And I had a freelance client last year. He was just like, yeah, whenever you can. Please don't do that. So then he understood that if he says, just whenever, like other things are coming as a priority and they're gonna come first. So then this year I was like, okay, I need this thing for this date. It's like, yes, please, yes, let's do that. And it's been working, it's fine. But then it's always on the other, like the extreme end. And with time, I'm learning to pull it back a bit and just like be content with some of the results and deliveries and things like that. That's a very tough exercise. I don't know how it's for you, but yeah, fully confessing. And then there are other things that are not necessarily related, but they also come into play. So do you have a purpose on what you're doing? Like, why do you do something? I usually need a goal, something that I'm working for, or a cause or whatever, just basically a purpose. Instead of just like, oh, what you're doing, whatever. Of course, I like to experiment and just like, get a material and do something with it. It's like, okay, what this allows me to do. But mostly, like, I get most joy out of work when I'm working with a goal in mind. And then this courage of like, you're really afraid of something, but then does it outweigh the excitement to do it or not? Are you freaking out more or are you excited to do it? Like what's your tipping point? What's your balance? And most of my life, I worked on my own, even though teaching and organizing and things like that, but just myself at home studio. And recently I've been collaborating more, and it's also great exercise. Then thinking about working in a group, there are different types of family. The family of the type community, type designers. This is it's a very nice family, I must say. The best, I think, description of it was David Lemon when he was retiring. He gave a speech at ISType. It was so nice. It was so lovely, like how grateful he was and appreciative he was of the type community, how welcoming it is, and it's really true. So this is my current, one of my current adopted families. I work at Type Network, and it's really interesting because, well, the story goes longer. This was a photo of us on our offsite last month. There are people that work more close in contact with, and others not so on a frequent basis, but it's been pretty interesting. And I've been with Type Network, we launched 3 years ago, and I've been with them I was before they started in 2015, then I left and came back in 2016. And it's a pretty nice family to work with for many reasons. And this is kind of that is part of a core team plus some foundries, and we have an extended family of the foundries that we represent, at currently 25 foundries, and we also have collaborators and partners, and it's a big family across time zones. Each one of us in our own like home studio, but we Skype, Hangout, Slack, Basecamp, whatever, all the time. So it doesn't feel like I'm working alone. And at Type Network, it's never really boring because I was called to be paid to do a work that I always did voluntarily, which is like organizing, planning, relations with clients, with foundries. And it's really amazing. And then, before, I was designing my own letter forms in that first axis. And I was like seeing all those typefaces being released, and I never got to play with them. At Type Network, I just have like that kind of library from those foundries, like, here, I haven't released this yet. What do you think? Does it work fine? I was like, you know, you have the dream job of like having all these great typefaces just as a playground. Yeah, I work more behind the scenes, but I do have contact with clients and with the foundries and then conferences. It's a fair compensation. It's not like, it pays better than teaching, but it's not like, you know, I'm rich, I'm whatever, but it's a good one. I'm alone at home, but mostly in a group with them, like all the time online. And we do have a purpose, you know, to represent those foundries, to take the market further, to service the clients. So there's always something behind what we are doing. And the best thing of this type community in general and the conference and things like that, newcomers, like, you're all welcome. If you're starting, if you want to reach out to someone, send an email, say hi at a conference, you know, like in the corridor, come over, ask a question, start a conversation, just tag along in a bar, like, you're welcome. It is a pretty nice community to be part of, and people are pretty open and willing to share their knowledge, their time, from any sort of experience. Of course, there are some rare exceptions, but mostly, yeah, you have the feeling that it's a warm welcome. Recently, like 2 months ago, for some reason, I took on cycling, and it's been a very challenging experience and frustrating one, because then it's the first time in many years that I have no idea about all the things. Of course, like, I use the bike as a commute to college and around the city in The Hague, but then to take into cycling with like all the specific things that are going around it, I found myself completely lost. And I started reading books and blogs, watching videos and stuff. And every time people said, you know, join a cycling club because you're going to find people that want to share what they are doing and their experience and everything around it. You'll be like, they're super friendly and welcome. Well, it was not so great. I tried it and it was highly frustrating. I ended up cycling on my own, but I did reach the goal that like we're going further than I had been before. And I went on my own against the wind and everything, but I did make it to the end and came back, regardless of them. And I was freaking out about it because it was the first time I was wearing with shoes with the pedal that clip in, like the cleats, and but then I was excited about, you know, let's do it. It was a mixed feeling, and it's also a mixed feeling of the result in terms of like, yeah, the club totally sucked, but then the end goal is like, okay, I can do it on my own. But it was so frustrated. Then I wrote in the expat group on Facebook, it's like, you know, beginners, cyclists that are beginners in The Hague that speak English, whatever, you know, what can we do and things like that. And then 3 women replied, and then we formed like a little message group that turned into a Facebook group. And then we already had 2 rides and other people joined. So when you don't find somewhere that you belong, you create your own, right? This was last Sunday, which was, well, yeah, Sunday last week, which was also my birthday. And I had an accident during the ride, like we had a little accident, and I instantly knew that we were in the right sort of group, because the other ones, like, people are sort of competitive and running, and it's like, you know, Strava, like, what's your average speed and this and that, and these are like, stop, everyone okay? Is this fine? Let's fix it, and like, how can we sort this out? Everyone was more focused on the people and how you could help other than their own things. It's a community building aspect of it that was really interesting. So then in this one, like, yay, got a group, we have a goal, and let's do it. Super exciting. That, in relation to the type community, I think it's about the same to an extent, that if you don't find something, go and create your own, This conference didn't start like this, from scratch. Like, there's someone with an idea that talks to someone else and then puts a lot of effort, a lot of time into something to grow and to create, to build a local community. This is ISType, which is a conference, the type conference in Brazil, which also started with a handful of people saying, let's go to a bar together monthly, and then became a small presentation of 30 people joining and presenting something and talking about it, then became 300 people with international speakers and workshops and multiple days. So, and then it built the local community to an extent that enabled us to bring, to take ISType to São Paulo, and that was like lifetime achievement kind of thing. It was really nice. So if you don't find, I know other people that are struggling trying to connect locally, just write to someone, reach out, and that's another frustration with the cycling. I was emailing people and not getting any replies. I message on Instagram, and it's where are those friendly, nice, open? No. And the type community, what the experiences that I heard, I've been asking some people about, how did you start and how was your first conference? And it's the opposite. It's this person encouraged me. So if there's someone that helped you start in the type community, and it's hey, I can give you a hand, come in, meet all of those people and do all those things. Also tell them how important that was to you. They'll be glad to hear. Because then after the cycling experience, I went to a phone stand, and then 2 people came up to me and say, that time I was really afraid, I was scared of the situation. You just came and gave me a hug that made the whole day. I was this right now made my whole day. It was so rewarding just to know that you helped someone, But then within the community, there's a lot of collaborations. So one thing that I forgot to say in the beginning, of course, because then I don't make notes and I'm very disorganized in that sense. I organize things for others, but for myself, it's a slightly different situation. So in the beginning, when you go to type design program or design school, you're kind of expected to be a designer, right? But then having that knowledge, you can act in any sort of job within the industry, and there are so many other things that are needed besides being a type designer. And then having that multiplicity, is that a word, is it? Of skills around you, you can collaborate with people, and that's super interesting and important. But then in this case, I'm going to talk about 2 specific type pairings that I have that I treasure very much. One of them is Claire Lindsay. She's my better half at Type Network. And I met Claire, we started working together virtually in 2016. And then this was almost a year later when we first met in New York live. It was this was the first contact. And we were already sort of sisters. It's really interesting because it's the first time that I have a collaboration to an extent that we don't really know where the work of one starts and the other ends, but also we don't really care about it. So when you see graphics at Type Network and things like that, these are the things that you can see because the work behind the scenes is not public. But when you see the things that are being put out at Type Network, mostly they are created by us. And it's really in the middle because there's nothing that I produce that she hasn't seen or hasn't touched. There's nothing that she has produced that I haven't seen or haven't touched, or files that we just work with each other at the same time via Dropbox together, and it's great. I really love this girl. And the other one is Thomas Gravermacher from Letterpress Amsterdam. Thomas is one of the most generous and kind people that I know of in my life. And the reason Thomas is here is about another subject, because now I'm going to dive into another part of the talk, which is it's portfolio but not portfolio, because there's one thing that I love like super the most in my life, which is the Kaaba Ornament. I have written about that. Some people know about this fixation. I talked about it a few times. And it happens, like for those who don't know, the Kaaba Ornament is a piece of ornament designed by Bram de Duus. And there's a lot that it was documented around lexicon and Trinité, but not about the Kaaba Ornament itself. But I'll get into that in a minute. And it's this piece of ornament that you have 4 positions, and you have a mirror image with 4 positions, so you have 8 possibilities with one single design. And I think it's the best ornament ever created, really. With those 8 possibilities, and it has the same, it's like yin and yang, the same amount of black and white. So there's so many possibilities with it. You like just drop dead. Like that book on the left has over 500 pages with sketches by Bram, like hand sketches that are then scanned and then offset printed on things that you can do with the ornament. The one on the right is letterpress printed by Bram with the ornament. And there's a third book that is offset printed with a digital version of the ornament that was designed by Paul van der Laan for the SGD digital foundry, not the metal, like the foundry. But then it was SGD that cast this for Bram for his retirement. And the first time I saw this I saw this book on the left was at the Boutenkant, which is the publisher in Amsterdam. We were doing a tour with the Type Media group back in 2010. And then I saw this, and then not only he had the book, but he has over 50 versions of the cover, letterpress printed and calligraphed and sketched by Bram, which is incredible. And then with all those covers and the colors and things like that, there also comes a letter, explaining. From the number 30, they're all numbered, and there are over 50 of them. It's just amazing. But then, so, how I met Thomas and how this story developed. At Type Amsterdam some years ago, that I forgot which year, probably 2014 or 15, Thomas was at Type Amsterdam with a little bit of an exhibition and with a setting, and then he had some ornaments around. And it's like, hey, you have type ornaments, because that's another general interest, was my master in London, and it's a longer story. And he was like, yeah, I do have some ornaments, come by the workshop, blah, blah. And it's like, what about the Kaaba ornament? And it's like, yeah, that's a part, we do have it as part of the Association of Letterpress Printers in the Netherlands. And then he calls Sander Pinkster, there's a friend, is like, yeah, they are in Sander's workshop, and he calls Sander, and then Sander comes over with the pieces of ornament. I was like, almost crying with them in my hand. And then they were like, yeah, we can borrow from Sander, you can bring to my workshop, you can print in my workshops, but then whatever you do, whatever you print, the only condition for you to use them is that one copy stays with Sander, one copy stays with me, and then the other copy goes to Bram. Right, what am I going to do with the ornament that Bram hasn't done himself, and it's going to be up to the standards of his work, right? So you start freaking out. And since I read the books, I had so many questions about the ornaments, because, yeah, Trinité and Lexicon are documented. There are books, there are sketches about it. You can find material at the special collections. But about the Kaaba, besides those books that he wrote and published himself, there are no other sort of documentation on how he developed that shape. I had so many questions, and was like, okay, I'm going to prepare my questions, and I'm going to print something great, and I'm going to, visit him and take this to him and ask all the questions. Unfortunately, that's my biggest regret in life. I don't have many, but that is pretty much the top. He passed away before I could do that. And he was the only person that could ever answer those questions. Because since then, I have asked, the publisher, tried to contact the family, and then asked people who work with him, no one has ever seen anything around it. So it became pretty challenging, and that's a moment where freaking out about something that was never enough won over being excited and actually getting contact with this design hero, right? But then on the other hand, Thomas, after Bram passed, Thomas got in contact and said, hey, do you want to teach a workshop together with the Kaaba ornament? I was like, hell yeah, And then he got the boxes, the original wooden boxes from Sander's workshop, and then together with it, some instructions, handwritten and sketched by Bram, on how to use the ornament and how to sketch the ornament. And then opening those boxes, it was another moment of like, oh my God, I am crying because this is just the best thing. Like this is a sketch by Bram, and he gave numbers to the ornaments from 1 to 8, and he would know how they look like, of course, because he worked with them like for decades. You know, he went blind over this thing, and then it says there, like it said in the 19th of November 2002, precisely in 1 hour. It's out of this world, and like the precision of the sketches, and I mean, this is like a quick sketch, right? The person was just incredible. And then we did the workshop, the first workshop, like first giving people some rubber stamps to try some settings, and then they would compose with the ornaments. And the first time we just did something that was completely crazy and like a disorganized setting, which was chaotic, but it was super fun. And we had this workshop, a few people came by. And then the following year, we did it again, but then we created a system for it, and it was much smoother and easier. And then finally, after teaching people how to work with the ornament, I kind of allowed myself to work with it in a way that was more free, because, you know, like I had this feeling, okay, Bram is not going to look at what I'm doing and judge it by the quality of the printing and the setting, right? So this was the first, like there's an event in Milan called Letterpress Workers, and it happens in June, and like invited guests like letterpress printers, and they also have a book that they publish every year. And then I got invited, and then I got invited to the book, and then I started, because of some talks with Thomas about like windmills and influenced by the work that Bram had done with the ornament, I just said something, it's like, you know, let's just be free with it, do whatever, a little bit of an exercise. And I printed like the Kaaba windmill, and it was part of the letterpress workers book. And then the following year, after the other workshop, I said, you know, I did something square, because Kaaba also like was related to the square. Let's do something round. And freely started putting together the ornaments, like without really thinking much about the order of them, just kind of reflecting what I was doing on an angle. You know, when you are in that flow of work, that you just don't, like you're just doing something, and you're just into it so much. That's what happened with this project. And then I started one day, kind of continuing another, and it's like, you know what? You know, I'm going to test print this to see how it looks like. And it was looking like this, with like, I mean, part of it, and then we put mirrors around to see how the whole would be looking like. And I was like, that's it. That's what the first time that it was actually, I didn't feel like I needed to change a single ornament, like the position of any of it. That was, this project basically was what tipped that scale, that never enough scale, like this, like brought it way back, because I was so happy with it. Just like working with the ornament and be able to do something that made me happy about that. And then, of course, compose the other 3 parts, the 3/4 of it, test printed, was working fine. And then, since there are 4 parts, you can rotate them and play around with them and create this range of prints. And then was like, Thomas was like, this is really exciting, you know, let's then do, like, let's print this together for real, like in a run of something. Like, we started creating this whole project. So it is a super exciting project. It's not about exposure, like it's something that is going to be published, I mean, self-published, but still something that's going to be out in the world with a credit. You know, there's no compensation. We are selling them, but it's not like, it's not about the money, and it's, no. We had, there was a goal, and it's like, yeah, let's freaking do it. Like, not freaking out at all. Super excited about it. And then, of course, started to think about loads of, okay, there's the circle. Let's try this, like a square version, and then a triangle version. It's like, okay, you know, they are not as interesting as the first one, and the possibilities turning them around are not so great. Let's stick to that. So then we tested papers, we tested ink colors and stuff, and then we picked the paper that we are going to use. Then I did a version of it on white, like with silver ink on white paper, with the quarters kind of spread apart a bit for that year's book of the letterpress workers. And we printed the other ones with a silver paper for a folder that contains all the 8 sheets. And then for the cover, like, okay, let's design the cover, and things kind of happened organically, like between me and Thomas. It's like great collaboration, and we respect each other, we trust each other. I was like, and he's like very cheeky, like he's, you know, what if we use this? Like, oh yeah, let's try that. Oh yes, we definitely need to use the silver powder, like not only print in silver ink, but with the silver powder, it really pops and shines, and we get excited about stuff. And so we did print the Kaaba mandala, like, and the whole project kind of took 2 years. But last March, we had a little bit of a release party. I mean, it has been in the works on and off for 2 years. And then it was like, okay, we have to celebrate this. So we set up like this little, very little modest exhibition at his workshop. So there were like the initial, like some printout, like prints by Bram with his sketches and instructions on the ornament. And then all the 8 prints. Is this, oh no, it's just my perspective. The folders are there on the side, and then you have the 8 of them on the wall. And then there was the previous one, and then more folders and things like that. And we had a little opening, friends came over, had a bit of a party, right? So this is a project that, I mean, it was not for free, because we put in a lot of time from both of us, and we did buy a few things, but not a lot, so it's not expensive at all, but it was not free. And we do need to count the time that we put into something, right? Because that also goes into how much it costs, otherwise it's not sustainable. But there's no way we are getting that time back. Like, this is a project that is not for profit. And it would take a lot of time. Like, if we did all in a row, maybe it would be like less than a month. For sure it would be less than a month. It would be like 2-3 weeks amount of work, both of us working. But then some projects just take time, and you need the time in between to let it grow and think about them. And for me, it is a part of the process for the personal projects. That's why they've been in the drawer for a while. We were kind of surprised with the quality that it had, not only because we tried hard, but also like with doing so many prints and the pressure, the amount of ink, they're fairly consistent for what it is, you know, like a manual process. And you know, like we could go on and stuff like that, but we are satisfied. So we were not easily satisfied, but we're not overly critical about it. So it's a good compromise. So then the next step is the Kaaba press. And that's it. I mean, I'm getting a couple of boxes from the Association of Letterpress Printers of the Netherlands, like the Kaaba boxes. And a friend has given me his Adana press, and I'll set up the Kaaba press at home. So the letterpress that will only have the Kaaba ornament. And that's kind of a super dream come true. And I'm not freaking out. Super excited about it, like let's do it, and I'll tell you more about it when it happens. Thank you.